Well, good morning, everyone, and as usual, thank you for joining the Central Kentucky weather page, where I think we have some really good forecasting here and some good outlooks for what to expect. If we have severe weather, if we have winter weather, or if there's nothing going on at all, we talk about everything here. So thanks for joining. We're way above 20,000 followers now, and I expect that as we head into winter, those numbers are going to pick up because, as I always say, people love snow. It's never ceased to amaze me how people just really love snow. You can talk about a potentially dangerous tornado outbreak coming or whatever the case might be, and nobody really cares. I mean, they act like they don't really care. But as soon as you start talking about snow, then everybody, their eyes light up like it's Christmas time. So we're in October now, and this is winter weather outlook month. We're getting prepared for it at work, and so I thought that here on my personal Central Kentucky weather page, I'd do a little discussion on it. So Monday or Tuesday, I posted my thoughts for the upcoming winter, and it seemed like there were some folks that were skeptical. So maybe we can go over a couple of things here and add some more information to the discussion. So what I've got pulled up here, and I hadn't looked at these until today because, to be frank about it, usually these climate prediction center outlooks are pretty far off. They very rarely verify. But in this case, I think that the CPC outlooks for the upcoming winter are going to end up being pretty much spot on because they're seeing, obviously, and we're going to go through this here in just a moment, but they're seeing the same things that I'm seeing, and that any meteorologist who kind of knows what they're doing here is seeing, which is that winter of 23-24 for Kentucky is probably going to end up being very close to average with temperatures and with precipitation. And again, we're going to get ready to go through this and talk about it just a little bit. But anyway, we're going to start off here with November, December, January period. And you can see that with the temperature outlook, they're expecting things to be pretty average. They call it equal chances. Basically, that means it could go either way, but we're looking for it to be about average. And so there's your temperature forecast. Again, this is the November, December, January period. And then with precipitation, more of the same. Kentucky is in that pretty much ho-hum, average-looking zone. So let's go to the meat and potatoes of winter, which is December, January, and February. This is actually the 3-month period that makes up what we call meteorological winter. For record-keeping purposes, winter starts on December 1st and ends on the last day of February, which this year will be February 29th because it is a leap year. But they're showing temperatures just slightly above average for the winter season and precipitation just slightly below average. Now, if you interpolate here, you can pretty much figure out that we're close enough to this zone that you could pretty much call it average, okay? They're thinking that it's going to trend a little bit warm and dry, and that's just based on, historical trends with what we see, in these El Nino winters. But I'm looking for it to be, pretty much what they're showing here, which is just close to average, maybe trending a little bit warm, but again, pretty much close to average. So what that means is that we're probably not going to be looking at a brutally cold winter. We're not going to be looking at a winter that has lots of snowfall. It's not going to be snowing all the time. We're going to see things sticking pretty close to where they normally are. So in terms of snowfall, again, I'm talking about maybe 14, 15 inches of snow for the entire season, I think is what I was discussing in my winter outlook a couple of days ago. And precipitation as far as rainfall, I'm thinking probably somewhere on the order of 19 or 20 inches of rain for the entire season, which actually would be just a little bit above average. But I based that upon the fact that when I was looking through all of the prior winters here in central Kentucky where we had a strong El Nino phase, we almost always saw rainfall end up in that 18, 19-inch range. And it's kind of uncanny how consistent that was in the data. Snowfall is a little bit larger zone, a range. We saw a couple of winters where we had only a few inches. There were a couple of strong El Nino winters where we recorded close to 20 inches, so there's a bigger range there, but most of them were kind of in the middle there, 13, 14, 15 inches of snow for the season. The rainfall, though, was really consistent. So, and temperatures were pretty consistent too. I saw a signal for some chilly weather in November in several of the analog years I was looking at, which can lead people to think that winter's here early and it's going to be harsh. But that's not necessarily the case, because then we go into December and January and things got back to normal, or in some cases even more mild in those 2 months. And then, like I was discussing, I think that when we get to the end of January, and especially going into February, that's where we'll have to start watching for the possibility of one good winter storm, maybe a couple of winter storms at the most. So you can see here in the CPC outlook, they've kind of got more of the same idea with precip and with temperatures. Now, the reason that this happens is because when you have a really strong El Nino, you get the northern branch of the jet set up here across the northern tier of the country, and the subtropical jet will set up down here, okay, which leads to all of this rainfall and storminess. And so what that means is there's like a belt line across the country here where you're sort of in between. Okay, the storm tracks are to the north of us and to the south of us, and we end up sort of in between. And so that's why we miss out on a lot of the weather that happens throughout winter. And so these strong El Nino winters end up being pretty boring around here. So that's why I was saying the other day, some of these outlooks that I've seen, like from the Farmer's Almanac and the Freimeyer family forecast, and some of the other things that I've been seeing, where they're calling for brutally cold and snowy conditions all winter, that's almost certainly not going to happen. I mean, if it does happen, it would be the first time that it's ever happened during a strong El Nino. I mean, it would be unheard of. So anything is possible. I'm not going to completely rule it out, but it's extremely unlikely that that's going to happen, because again, it's just never happened before. So more than likely, we're going to see this really strong influence from the subtropical jet across the southern tier of the country. And so I think that we're going to end up sort of in that in-between zone here in the Ohio Valley, where we just don't get a lot of winter weather. Now, having said that, it is also true, and I posted a snippet about this a month or two ago. It's also true that if you think about all of the memorable winter weather events that we've had here in central Kentucky, people still to this day talk about the late 70s. We still talk about the superstorm of 1993. People still talk about the infamous dusting of February of 98 that ended up resulting in a couple of feet of snow. The big ice storm that we had in the 2000s. We had a couple of pretty good winter storms in the winter of 15, 16. There's a lot of events that people remember in their minds, and all of those winter weather events happened in El Nino years. Okay, so I'm not saying that it's not going to snow at all. We can definitely, and we have many times before in these El Nino winters, we can definitely get one or two winter storms to sneak up on us. And because of the fact that the subtropical jet is pumping so much moisture into the southern part of the country like this, if we get things to line up to where we get a winter storm in an El Nino cycle like this, it can be significant. So while it's not going to be snowing all the time, I don't look for there to be multiple snowstorms. It's cold, it's snowy all the time. That's not going to happen. It's still true, though, that we could get one or two storms that could be significant. And I think if we get those, we're probably looking toward February for that to happen. Seems like, when we're coming out of winter in these El Nino phases, that's when things start to get a little more volatile in the eastern part of the country. So that would be the most likely time frame for us to get any winter weather this year. So snow lovers won't be completely left out. It's interesting. Last winter, the winter of 22-23, is the least snowy winter ever recorded in the bluegrass of Kentucky, which I think is kind of interesting. So, I'm not looking for a bunch of snow this year, but I think that we still will have a chance for one or two good storms. Now, here's the other point I want to make is that when we start to come out of winter, and of course, probably toward the middle of the season, end of January or so, I usually update this outlook, and we'll talk about this more at that time because we'll have more data. But just as an FYI to put in the back of your head, when we come out of these El Nino winters, we start getting into March and April, something that we'll really have to watch for is the possibility of severe thunderstorms. Because again, you've got this situation where the subtropical jet is streaming across the southern part of the country and it's pumping a lot of moisture in. So you can very easily kick up some pretty strong areas of low pressure in the eastern part of the country, and we've seen that before too, where coming out of a El Nino winter, we have some pretty violent, severe weather episodes. So that's something else that we'll have to keep an eye on as we get later in the winter is, can we generate some pretty heavy duty thunderstorms around here? We'll have to watch for that too. And that may be something that has happened in prior strong El Ninos, which could be why it was sort of wet here in central Kentucky in those analog years that I was looking at. So anyway, I just wanted to kind of show you this. It's interesting that even the Climate Prediction Center is seeing this because it's very obvious. Once you get a really strong El Nino or a really strong La Nina for that matter, when the ENSO cycle goes into a phase that's really strong, it becomes very predictable in how it's going to affect the weather across the United States. The stronger that Nino cycle gets, the more likely it is that that's going to be the dominant player in our weather. And so the outlooks end up being pretty easy to do because it's very predictable how this is going to go. And even CPC is seeing it. And they've got this in their official outlooks now with, again, pretty much average conditions across the area. So sorry to tell you, if you're looking for a super cold, super snowy, super icy, super brutal winter here in Kentucky, I'm sorry to tell you it's probably not going to happen this year. But again, we'll keep our eyes out. We get later in the season, we'll be watching. We might get a good storm or two. I like a good snowstorm myself. Every once in a while, a good 18-inch snow would make me pretty happy too. But I just have to be realistic. I'm trying to give you the best outlooks and forecasts that I can because it does matter to a lot of people. There are people who have business interests in mind here, like guys who run landscaping companies, for example. And so through the winter months, their bread and butter is pushing snow. They depend on being able to go out and push snow to have money coming in while we're in that cold season and the grass isn't growing. That's just one example out of many. But the point is, a lot of people really need this information. And so hopefully this was helpful to you and I'll give you a little bit of guidance as we head toward winter. So anyway, stay tuned to the page. There will be a lot more coming. We've got some interesting stuff coming up. And we'll be posting it here on the Central Kentucky Weather Facebook page. So thanks again for watching, and we will talk to all of you guys and girls later on.